Hello, everyone. Welcome to Avaya University and our Overcoming Chronic Pain curriculum. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner Ike and I are the co-founders of Avaya. Thanks so much for joining us. In this next class, we are talking with Dr. Howard Schubiner, who is board certified in pediatrics and internal medicine, and he is the director of the Mind-Body Medicine Center at Ascension Providence Hospital. He has conducted research in the field of mind-body medicine. He has authored more than 100 publications in scientific journals and books. He has given more than 400 lectures to scientific audiences regionally, nationally, internationally, and he will be talking with us about getting to the source, understanding something called predictive coding in neural circuits in chronic pain. So we're going to talk a lot about neuroscience. We're going to talk a lot about the brain in this class and how ultimately the source of most chronic pain being a disordered brain, and the importance of addressing the cause of your pain, not just finding ways to cope with your pain with different treatments or what have you, but actually finding the cause of your pain being the key to alleviating it, to overcoming that pain. His approach is designed to eliminate pain, not cope with it, and he actually helps you train your brain out of pain. So the first step that we're going to talk about is ultimately just understanding how your brain works. Right? That's the first step in helping you overcome your chronic pain via this conversation around neuroscience, via this conversation about training your brain out of pain. So how does your brain work, right? There's something called predictive coding. This was a new term for me that I was not aware of. And this helps you understand how your brain actually predicts how you should react in life. Right? You see what you expect to see. You hear what you expect to hear, what you are predicted to hear. And most importantly, in this conversation in chronic pain, we feel what we expect to feel. So if you have been in pain for a number of years or months or even just weeks, you might be in a state of expecting to feel that pain when you get up in the morning, expecting to feel that pain when you go and take a walk or whatever. If you've had the experience of it already, then your brain actually starts to expect to continue to feel that, like it's becoming your new normal. So we talk a lot about fear. We talk a lot about how so many of us can get wrapped up into the fear of our pain because it's something that's just such a horrible experience. And I share a little bit about some of my experiences in my past with my chronic plantar fasciitis years ago, and how afraid of it I was, how every morning when I got out of bed, if anyone's familiar with plantar fasciitis, your fascia and muscles tighten up overnight. So when you take that first step in the morning out of your bed, it can be very painful. So we talk a lot about fear of your pain and how this fear then creates a loop in your brain, creates a vicious cycle that just keeps going and going and going. So just take a moment before we start this class and look at that for yourself, right? How much are you living in fear of your pain right now? How much is that fear dictating your life? How much is that fear creating expectations so that your brain then sends signals to your body to be in pain, right? We talk a lot about unlearning your pain because your pain is something that has been learned. Dr. Schubiner shares a story about how he had back pain and how his body had learned to be in pain. So we talk a lot about obviously unlearning that pain and what are the different techniques and things that you can do to do that. And he pulls from all sorts of techniques, like let's say mindfulness techniques, psychological techniques like CBT, ACT. He talks about different deeper emotional focused techniques and then puts his own spin on those more familiar techniques. And I think you're really going to get a lot out of this conversation and take a lot of amazing pointers home for yourself in your journey. So let's get started with our class with fellow teacher, Dr. Howard Schubiner. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Schubiner.
It's a pleasure. I didn't know about Avaya until now.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you're getting to know about Avaya, and I didn't know about you either until Dr. Ron Siegel recommended that we get in touch. So I'm so glad that he did that, and I'm very excited to talk about our topic today. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, what do you see as drawbacks in how chronic pain is treated in a traditional medicine sort of way?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. If you go to the doctor and you have a fever, do you want the doctor to say, "Whoa, you've got a fever. Okay, yeah, you've got high fever, middle fever. We can treat fever. We have Tylenol. We've got non-steroidals. We've got ice baths. You know, if the Tylenol doesn't work, we'll just put you in an ice bath." Like,
No.
that's not what you want, because now we understand that fevers are caused mostly by bacteria or viruses, and we can treat the actual underlying cause. How do we treat pain in this country? We treat it symptomatically. We say you have the disease called pain. It's chronic pain. Oh, you've got, what kind of pain? Oh, you've got fibromyalgia pain, or irritable bowel pain, or pudendal neuralgia pain, or migraine pain, or, it's just describing the different kinds of pain, but it's not describing why you have it. And what we're finding out is that we can do better. And so medicine treats pain symptomatically, medications, injections, even surgery, but it doesn't get at the underlying cause. So it's not what people want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, if it's not getting to the underlying cause, then that is, I'm sure, what so many people watching right now are looking for, so they can actually deal with this and get rid of it or alleviate it a lot, so that they can get their life back. So that's right, traditional medicine. What about I know there's a lot of psychological therapies as it relates to chronic pain. So what are your thoughts around those?
Right. More and more what's happened is we've learned, and I'll talk about this a little more in detail in a minute probably, we've learned that the source of most chronic pain is actually in the brain. So that would make sense if we're beginning to understand that on a neuroscience level, which is hard for people to wrap their head around that in and of itself. But we're beginning to understand that in the last 15, 20 years. So you think, well, we could treat it psychologically. Well, that would make sense. But as I've gotten into this field of chronic pain over the last 17, 18 years now, what I've seen is that the typical psychological treatments for chronic pain, they're excellent treatments, but they tend not to address the underlying cause. They tend to be coping models. Cognitive behavioral therapy will help you cope with your pain better. Acceptance and commitment therapy, we're not trying to get rid of the pain, will help you manage it better and move on with your life, which is great things. And even mindfulness. I've been a mindfulness teacher for 20 years. Everyone should learn mindfulness. It's an amazing thing. But yet the research on these therapies, CBT, ACT, and mindfulness, show that none are better than the other and all have very small effects. So they're not actually helping people eliminate their pain. They're actually helping them cope with it. And the reason is that they're not geared toward understanding the underlying cause, and therefore the methods they're using tend to be methods that are coping methods. And often they don't get at underlying emotions as well. So there's three reasons why those therapies haven't had the desired effect for most people. Yet they're all excellent therapies. So what we're doing is we're trying to take it in a slightly, just a few tweaks to those, which make all the difference in the world.
Got it. So before we get into the tweaks that you're making to those, what about like holistic therapies, alternative therapies? There's so many different things out there. What are your thoughts on that?
What I've learned over the last, again, decade and a half of doing this is that the holistic treatments have their own nosology or etiologies of, you've got chronic pain, so it must be you have chronic Lyme disease or heavy metal toxicity or candida overgrowth or adrenal fatigue, or it's the food that you're eating. And that can lead to costly, difficult, and sometimes frustrating and expensive, well, I said costly, I guess, ways of approaching it. That, again, from our point of view, as I'll mention, most chronic pain is actually a disorder of neural circuits in the brain. And so, again, if you have the wrong cause, the wrong diagnosis, the wrong etiology, then you're not really getting to eliminating it.
Got it. Okay. So let's talk about your approach as it relates to these neuro circuits in the brain. So how is your approach different? And for people watching right now, what would be your first step for them to help them alleviate their chronic pain?
Yeah, well, the first thing is understanding how the brain works. So we have to really start with neuroscience. And it turns out that neuroscience has advanced in the last couple of decades to the point that hasn't gotten filtered down into medicine. So the point is that the brain works by predictive coding. So I don't know, like that's not a common phrase that people know about. If I said, oh, predictive coding, it sounds like a computer.
Right.
Right? It's AI. But that's how the brain works. Our brain predicts how we should react, and then it creates how we should see, hear, feel. Our brain creates what we see. We don't see with our eyes. We see with our visual cortex in the brain. We see what we expect to see, what we've been coded to see. We hear what we expect to hear. And I've got tons of examples of that I don't have time to discuss right now. But we feel what we expect to feel. The story I always tell is that my wife has the same breakfast every morning: sliced apple, yogurt, granola. And a couple of summers ago, she woke up early. It was dark. She had an extra slice. She comes up to the bed and she says, "Here, honey." And I open my mouth. I don't see it. And I take a bite of this slice. And I have this strong sense of disgust, like she had just poisoned me. So it's only 6 in the morning. I hadn't done anything horrible yet that day. So it was a peach, not an apple that day. But my brain was expecting apple. And when I got the softness of a peach, even though it was sweet, and I love peaches, my brain took that sensation and turned it into disgust because it was expecting apple.
Got it.
And when I had back pain several years ago, every time I bent over, I had pain. And it turned out there was nothing wrong with my back. My brain had learned pain from an injury that I had had a few years earlier. And it was coding for it, was creating that pain every time I bent over as a conditioned response, a Pavlovian response, if you will. And I had to understand why that was happening and then change the coding, change the neural circuits in my brain that were the cause of the pain, because it wasn't a back problem. And when I did that, the pain went away. So I didn't have to cope with it the rest of my life. I had to learn what was causing it and change the coding, the circuits in my brain. Now, what percentage of chronic pain is not due to a structural problem in the body? This is an amazing and revolutionary question. And the answer is roughly 90%.
Wow.
Well, if you have a headache, if you have chronic headaches, you go to a doctor, you go to a neurologist, you get an MRI or CT of your brain. It's normal. So you don't have a bleed or a tumor or an infection or vasculitis or something. So what's the cause? Chronic headache. But these are due to neural circuits in the brain. So 90+% of headaches, migraine, tension headaches, etc., are due to neural circuits in the brain, not a disease in the head. Well, if you go to fibromyalgia and irritable bowel syndrome, chronic abdominal cramp, chronic pelvic pain, even though it might be called pudendal neuralgia or interstitial cystitis, there's no structural cause that we can identify. And if you take neck and back pain, which is the most common forms of pain, the vast majority of the time, even though the MRI may be abnormal, because everyone's MRI is abnormal, including yours, even though you're very young, and mine, because even though I'm very old, very abnormal, that doesn't mean that's the cause of pain. So this is the revolution in neuroscience and medicine, to understand that most pain is due to neural circuits in the brain. And there's lots of ways of figuring that out, of sorting it out. And that's what I write about and what I speak about is the clues. Like if you have pain that turns on and off. Well, if you have a broken arm, the pain doesn't turn on and off. Broken arm's a structural problem. Pain that turns on and off is your brain turning it on and turning it off.
Got it.
Or it moves from one part of the body to the other. That's your brain moving it from one part of the body to the other. It's amazing. Or it gets triggered by the wind. Well, wind or cold doesn't cause pain, but it triggers the brain, just like my bending over was triggering my brain to generate that pain. Does that make sense?
So when you know that, like when people watching right now, if this is resonating with them and they're like, oh yeah, this is me. I don't have any problem with my scans or my MRIs or whatever, or nothing structural wrong, no broken bones. So if the cause of this issue is these neural circuits, what do you do next?
What we do is we start with just what I'm telling you. We start with education on how the brain works. We explain to people, this is not all in your head. You are not crazy. This is not your fault. Anyone who says that's all in your head is either cruel or ignorant or both. So we're validating that the pain is real, not imaginary. But we want to get to the cause, because if you get to the cause, then you can get to the treatment. Then you can get to curing model rather than a coping model. So we start with neuroscience education, and we start with diagnosis. Does the pain shift? Does it move? Is it triggered? All those factors that we go over to make sure that people, and most times people can do this for themselves. It's not that hard. Mm-hmm. So once you get to that point, now you're understanding how the brain works. And now you're looking at it differently. And this shift makes all the difference in the world. When you're understanding, oh my God, I'm not broken, but my brain has created and is persisting on these neural circuits for pain that are real, but reversible. Mm-hmm. Holy crap. That's liberating. Right. And you can begin to reduce the fear of having a chronic disease, the fear of living with this the rest of your life, the fear of pain itself. Every time you move or shift, you wake up in the morning, you go, oh God, here it is again. Here I am again. I'm stuck. I'm trapped. And when you can begin to liberate your mind from that and have the hope and optimism that you actually are going to get better, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some work, but you are going to get better. Wow. Mm-hmm. That's when this magical shift occurs. And then we can do the work of getting better.
And what does that look like for people as far as the work of getting better?
God, I just knew you were going to ask that.
I couldn't help it.
I just led right up to that.
Yeah.
So the work is designed to eliminate the pain, not cope with it. Mm-hmm. The work, and it's not and it takes from all the great psychological techniques that I was mentioning. It takes from cognitive behavioral therapy. So we do graded exposure. So we help people gradually. If you have pain with walking, I'm going to have you imagine walking without pain. I'm going to have you start walking and stop fearing it. And you start, maybe it's 2 steps or 10 steps or half a block. But over time, your brain is going to learn that the pain is not dangerous, and you're going to reverse those neural circuits. We're going to help you find from ACT, we're going to help you find joy and meaning and purpose and play and laughter. All these things are activating the neural circuits of the brain that are opposite of the painful neural circuits. It's not just distracting you from the pain. It's actually taking those other neural circuits and ingraining them. And so the painful neural circuits become crowded or overgrown like a path that's all weedy now. And your brain's not using those as a default mechanism anymore. And we're using mindfulness techniques, because now if your pain is some crippling disease and you can notice it and pay attention to it, it's not going to make it go away. But if your pain is a thought, if your pain is a neural circuit in the brain and you've diagnosed that and that's the truth will set you free, because now you can pay attention to a thought, which is what mindfulness is so unbelievably powerful for. If you're paying attention to the pain as just a thought and seeing it that way, you're separating from it and you're not fearing it. All of a sudden, then it has a chance of just going away, turning on, turning off. And the more you do that, the more you're training your brain out of pain. Mm. And the last thing we're doing is we're working with deeper emotion-focused techniques. So those first 3 techniques that I mentioned are enough to help most people actually out of pain. But some people with childhood trauma, with abuse or neglect in their histories, who are trapped in difficult social situations, because the genesis of the pain in the first place is that the danger signal in the brain is activated by emotions. Mm-hmm. In the same way that the danger signal in the brain is activated by a physical injury. So when a physical injury occurs, it's not your injury that actually is causing the pain, it's the brain, which is a weird way to think about it. But that's a whole topic in and of itself. Mm-hmm. But research shows that emotions and stress activates the exact same neural circuits of the brain, danger alarm mechanism, as does an injury. And so when you're trapped in your life and you get a headache or you get stomach pain or you get back pain, the pain is a message that your brain is giving you. And it's up to us to help unravel that and interpret the message so people can understand their lives in a new way and they can see there's a reason for the pain. It's not your enemy.
Right.
It's actually the solution your brain has devised to try to alert you, kind of like a smoke alarm is there to alert you to a problem. So it's really an amazing phenomenon when you really help people see what their lives are all about and why they have it in the first place, and what they can do to make it go away. I was at a conference, with some, really high famous pain doctors, and one of the pain doctors said, I don't care if they have pain. I care if they go to work, if they're functioning. And if you've lived in chronic pain, that's to just function with it. It's not your goal. It is overwhelming. It takes your breath away. It is, it's a powerful, powerful experience. And it's really hard for a lot of people to understand in our society that this powerful experience of pain can be purely generated by the brain in the absence of a physical injury. Right. And most of the time that's the case. So this is a revolution in understanding pain.
Yeah, like you had said near the beginning of your back pain and how your brain had learned the pain, right? And having to unlearn it. It's such an interesting thing that our bodies do, right? Learning something and then maintaining that learning and not going back to whatever it was before after it heals. So that is fascinating.
Yeah. Because it gets reinforced. The pain leads to fear of pain. The fear of pain leads to more danger signal. The danger signal leads to more pain. So most people with chronic pain, and I'm sure people watching this will resonate with this. Most people with chronic pain, it gets worse over time because of this feedback reinforcement mechanism. Most people with chronic pain, it spreads over time to different parts of the body. Starts in the lower back and then it's spreading to the upper back, or it's spreading to the arms or legs. Most people with chronic pain have triggers where now all of a sudden there's all these things that are triggering it, as I mentioned, like the weather or wind or cold or heat or standing or sitting. So, it's a very predictable process that we see, and it's extremely common.
So what's your success rate in helping people, with your work? And have you done any research specifically around your method?
We are thrilled that we've been able in the last decade or so to advance several research studies. First of all, one of the emotion-focused techniques that we've been using, one of my books is written with my collaborator, Dr. Alan Abbas from Halifax, Nova Scotia. And he is the foremost teacher and researcher in the world on ISTDP, which most psychologists never actually heard of, but it's intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy, ISTDP, and it's an emotion-focused therapy. And so there's a lot of other emotion-focused therapies like internal family systems and somatic experiencing, etc., where people have, and lots of others, and people have really learned to get at emotions. And there's a whole meta-analysis of 30 studies in ISTDP that we've written on. So that's an area that has a lot of research, emotion-focused techniques. We also did a fibromyalgia study, NIH-funded $3 million study, comparing cognitive behavioral therapy to an emotional awareness and expression therapy for fibromyalgia. And this was the first study, large-scale study, that showed that one psychological treatment looking at emotions was actually superior to the standard cognitive behavioral therapy for fibromyalgia. And then we've just recently finished a back pain study at the University of Colorado, where we haven't published it yet, but the results are astonishing. 95% of the people with chronic back pain for 10 years did not have a structural problem in their back.
Wow.
And of those people that we treated using this approach that I've outlined here, 75% of those were virtually pain-free in 1 month. So it was just an amazing stuff that we've been so fortunate to be able. The colleagues that I have who are doing this high-level research, Mark Lumley in Detroit at Wayne State University, Tor Wager, who was at University of Colorado, Yoni Ashar, Alan Gordon, all these people that we've been working with to take these methods and actually study them is because you have to. If you don't have the research, who's gonna believe you? You can't
Right.
just go by anecdotal evidence. We've got a ton of that, but the research is really been important so that people understand that, or that scientists can see the power of this work and changing the focus of chronic pain.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on all of that amazing work, and thank you so much for, putting it all together for people and helping people get that actual evidence to see if this is, the route they want to take to help with chronic pain. So from that perspective, like, where can people watching right now learn more about this method, your work? Are there practitioners or people across the US or the world that could help them, utilize and start practicing this technique?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is that most of the people people with chronic pain who get interested in this work learn about it and they read about it and they see themselves in the pages. It just resonates for them because they can see it. Initially, they may be put off by the idea that the pain's in their brain because they equate that with being in their head, which is not what we're saying at all. But when they actually understand the neuroscience and they see how their pain has shifted, moved, all these characteristics of it, and the fact that the doctors haven't been able to find what the heck is going on, or that all the treatments they've had haven't worked. And then they begin to look at their psychological milieu and they say, oh, I had a woman who had pain in her butt. And I asked her when it started. And she said, right about the time my husband retired. So she's, oh, I get it, right? I see, I had this guy with pain in his side, and it totally went away when he had this employee that he had who was so annoying, so frustrating, left. And I said, he was a thorn in your side. And it was like this light bulb went on in his head because he could see the truth of how his psychological life, the stress in his life and the things in his life had actually interacted with his brain to create a warning signal. And it's a barometer. Our brains and our bodies are a barometer of what's going on in our lives. And when people can see that and understand that and get that, it's a gift. I had a guy ask a question at the end of a lecture I gave a couple years ago. He said, in our culture, pain is viewed as a gift from God. And I said, you know what? You're right. I mean, nobody wants chronic pain. People who are watching this with chronic pain look at it as the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And it is. It can totally destroy and ravage your whole life and your family's life. But it's your brain most of the time. I mean, there are times, of course, when if you have metastatic cancer, that's a physical cause of pain. If you have vasculitis, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, there's a whole variety of diseases. I'm a doctor, I know that. But when you look closely, 90% of people don't have those with chronic pain. And so your brain is trying to tell you something. And if you can get that and understand it, and if you can reverse it, and if you can deal with the issues in your life that may have led to it, that is a gift. And that's what we're trying to do. So if you go to some of the websites to begin to learn about it, then most of the time you'll start to see, if you do it with an open mind. And if you understand, we're not blaming anybody. It's not their fault. But there's the classic, this work started with Dr. John Sarno, Sarno. And he has 4 books that have sold millions because people have related to them and resonated with them. Dr. Sarno died a couple years ago now. But the website that is in his honor is the TMS Wiki, tmswiki.org, tmswiki.org. And it's a free, and it's run by volunteers who just want to help people understand the idea that the brain can cause pain. We have a nonprofit called the PPDA, so it's ppdassociation.org. So that's another site that has an amazing amount of material on it. My website is unlearnyourpain.com. So the idea is that you can unlearn your pain, like, and you mentioned that word, unlearn.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And it's amazing concept. So my website has got a lot of stuff there. You have access to all sorts of materials and resources. And on these websites, there's lists of practitioners around the country and around the world who are doing this work.
Awesome.
One of the amazing things is a lot of people get better on their own without, not everybody, not everybody can, it's not like a magic wand, but it's an amazing number of people. I get emails every day from people who say, hey, I've been using these methods, or I'm using your book, and I'm better. Thank you. I mean, that's amazing.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for all the resources, and everyone. I highly recommend you check anything out that resonates and discover that further for yourself. So this has been just an amazing conversation, and what does this all mean for how we view medicine as a whole, and how we view ourselves as really agents of change based on what you've been talking about today, right? We have so much power. So how do you view all this?
It's an amazing way of thinking about it. We have given up our power of our health to doctors and healthcare practitioners, feeling that we're the victim. We come in with the problem and they help us. And with chronic pain and this whole host of other things, it often doesn't work that way. It just hasn't worked. And when you think about it, it's not, and when you enlarge this discussion, it's not just chronic pain that the brain can generate. It's anxiety and depression. It's substance use. It's eating disorders. It's chronic fatigue. It's insomnia. I mean, these are the vast majority of things that are trouble people in our modern world. And we need to see that there's tremendous power in the brain, how the brain works to create and generate these things in our lives, in our body. But we can use that power once we understand it. And we're the agent of change. The person is the one who's going to make themselves better. And what an amazing opportunity that is to have, to be the agent of change. So
absolutely.
And we can really focus on what makes people healthy and live long. Why meaning and purpose, why social relationships, why self-awareness. All these things are the tools, the power that we can have to make ourselves healthier. Not just happier, but actually healthier. And this is a huge, public health issue, because it resonates all through our society. And it actually leads, I think, to understanding how society is structured and how society affects our health. Because if our society is, and Gabor Mate writes about this so eloquently, if our society is structured in a way that it makes people feel trapped and helpless, if it turns people into victims, if it turns people into little cogs and takes away their sense of agency and meaning and purpose, then we're going to be a unhealthy society with chronic pain and anxiety and depression and fatigue and insomnia and substance abuse and eating disorders. So this is a huge turning point, in our society, and with the opioid crisis and with the epidemic of chronic back pain has doubled in the past 20 years in this country.
Wow.
Back pain has doubled. And most people, when they think of back pain, they think that there's something wrong with their back. And 90% of the time, that's not true. This is an astounding statement to make.
Mm.
And I would never have thought that I would be in this position, 18 years ago, when I was just kind of going along my merry way as a physician,
Right.
and I read a book by Dr. Sarno, and he, The Mind Body Prescription, and he laid this out, the power of the brain to cause back pain and other disorders that we've mentioned. And it's been quite a ride, ever
Mm.
since.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for all of your work. And I love that, the agents of change, because that's really it. When we can really tap into our own power, our healing power, our body's amazing power to heal in our own, it's a beautiful thing. I've shared a few times on various classes throughout this series about the plantar fasciitis I struggled with years ago, and how many years I had it, and how big of a deal it was to me, and how awful it was, and really like clicking in with, understanding the letting go of the fear and all of those different kinds of things that I was eventually able to do, that eventually ended up, eliminating the pain. It's, yeah, I mean, you can't.
Yeah. When you understand it, and when you work on letting go of the fear and getting back to your life,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you make links between that and what's going on in your life, or what was going on in your life at the
Mm-hmm.
time. Uh,
A whole bunch of stuff.
it,
Yeah.
it could be. I mean, even sometimes there's a metaphor there. Sometimes with foot pain, it's like something I can't stand in my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there was a whole lot of that. That could be a whole conversation about what was happening in Andy's life during those years. So absolutely. So, and everyone watching, I hope that you can, take this information we've talked about today and bring it into your own life, and start really becoming aware of your pain, of your brain, of all of these different things that we've talked about. And I want to make sure that I mention a couple things before I ask for your final insights, Dr. Schubiner. So everyone, there's a couple of buttons below this video, and one leads over to a free gift that Dr. Schubiner has for you, and the other one leads over to his book. So just a couple notes on that. So the free gift is actually the first 5 chapters of his book called Unlearn Your Pain, which we just talked about. So if you click on that link, you can actually get those first free chapters for free. It's a digital ebook. And then the special offer button leads you over to his book, which you get $10 off if you purchase from his website. So a nice discount there. So anything else you want to say about your books, or what more they can get out of Unlearn Your Pain?
Well, just, the first part of the book is designed to be this understanding of the brain and understanding pain for what it really is, and helping people to actually look at their own situation and determine, most of the time it's not that hard to do, to determine if their pain is structural in nature or if it's neural circuit in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Once you do that, then the second half of the book is a self-guided recovery program with all these kinds of exercises and ways of dealing with pain and working to eliminate it, again, rather than cope with it, using the types of methods that we talked about, mindfulness type methods, graded exposure, getting back to your life methods, increasing joy and play and laughter and meaning in your life, and dealing with underlying emotions. Mm-hmm. So that's the model that we use. We've been so fortunate to be able to help people, and it's amazing to, like I say, get emails on a daily basis from people who are like you, who suffered and who found a different way and are, getting back to living their life. And so it's incredibly gratifying, and I just want to thank you and Avaya for putting this together and giving us the opportunity to let people know about it.
Our pleasure, absolutely. And thank you so much for your work and everything that you do in the world. Are there any last insights you want to leave people with before we wrap up?
I think if we continue to be humble, and we continue to be compassionate, I think if we continue to be self-aware and and just keep looking for the truth, keep investigating and keep looking, try to do it in a scientific way and a wise way. If we do that and we add just a dash of humor, I think things will go well. That's kind of what I use in my own life to try to get by, and to try to keep learning and try to keep exploring how we can help people and how we can find a way to survive in this kind of crazy world that we have now.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome. I think of that.
Mm-hmm. Little dash of humor. I love it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here and doing this. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching this, for listening to this, for tuning in and showing up for yourself today. And we will see you again soon. Thanks, everybody.